And you're comfortable, and you just have to say, I'm aware of it and I'm comfortable.
You'll get clarity at the appropriate time.
Thank you. The next point I'd like to raise is that when you said you got to 2 contractors, my advice has been that European contractors are generally considered the more expensive of contractors in these areas, and that some out of China and so on are more competitive, shall we say. Can you satisfy me that you went on a global search for the best and most effective operators to do this?
Yeah, well, you're never absolutely certain as to who's in the market or the game. This certainly project, in fact, it surprised me certainly at the point that we went to Australia to talk to the major players, primarily in the Southern Hemisphere, that in fact the Northern Hemisphere players came out of the woodwork at that particular time. So sufficient to say that it had that level of exposure or knowledge of understanding of what we're doing in both the Southern Hemisphere and in New Zealand, and some of the drivers that sit behind their interest in work in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's acknowledging a comment about Northern Hemisphere is considered to be perhaps an expensive environment. That's certainly not the case at the moment in the woes in and around, particularly Spain and Portugal and those areas that, you know, the Spanish connection associated with OHL Hawkins, and their advice to us about, I suppose, both the woes and the work opportunities there, and conversely the opportunities for them to be operating in the Southern Hemisphere. Equally, that they have actually been established in Australia for a little while, so it's actually as much a step across the ditch as opposed to a wholesale shift from the Northern Hemisphere.
I'd note, Graham, that in the expression of interest phase, the interest we got for this project was substantially better than for a large roading project a little bit further south of here.
And to be perfectly clear, no Chinese consortium or individual party submitted a bid in a global tender. That's why there's no Chinese bidders in here.
And acknowledging Chinese interests were in New Zealand during the feasibility phase of this project, expressing an interest and understanding of it.
Right, that's enough on design and construction for the moment. I doubt we'll have another conversation to do it again in the next piece of this. All right, I've just noted... Sorry, thanks Ian, rather Heath. Water uptake. What we call a PIM, Preliminary Investment Memorandum. I wrote this in a tense because I wrote this last week. It's actually just got one tweak being done to it now before it actually hits the deck. So if you really want to hit the right tense, it will be released this week. This PIM is simply intended to inform potential investors in the region of the broad parameters of the offer and seek non-binding expressions of interest between now and the end of April. And all that's designed to do is simply understand if there's a potential investment base out there interested, and try and put a ring around that and say what's the size of that in broad terms and who are they. So I've been very careful to say this phase is not seeking to raise capital, etc. Okay. Now, following the PIM, and depending on what we receive out of that process, we'll release what's called a full information memorandum, and that is targeted at eligible investors who meet the definitions and tests of experienced investors, which will be then reviewed by their own advisors, subject to our satisfaction and our lawyers' satisfaction. So just note that. Similarly, I did earlier discuss the water contract and price, so perhaps I don't need to go across that again. Just note on the financing side, we obviously hold regular investor representative committee meetings to review various material elements of this deal. We're working our way through the CII terms sheet, and we have some of the major terms already agreed, and we're refining some of the more detailed stuff as we speak. Actually, I've got a team doing that now. And obviously I've just noted that we need all investors to align, and that's a work in progress, etc. So that's probably me for specifically the guts of the report. Heath, maybe you might just want to briefly traverse finances.
clarification on that last sentence. The qualification of the public offer is for eligible investors only.
That's
There is
correct.
no general public offer.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Eligible investors. Yep.
So there won't be a prospectus.
Right, further questions? We've got a little bit more of this report to go, and then I'd like to invite Dr. Pearce to give us a bit of perhaps a more higher level overview. So any other questions in regard to up to page 91?
Sorry. Understood. So that means that this material you've just been talking about, none of that enters the public domain? The PI and the PIM or the IM?
It goes to parties, who are qualified as investors, and the threshold for that is quite low, but it can't be distributed to absolutely everybody because it's not an offer to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
Pete?
Right, just going through the financial aspect of the report. I suppose the key thing to take out of this is that we are currently undertaking a project reforecast. This is being worked on as we speak. We are planning on taking this to the HBRIC board and to the Investor Representative Committee in early March. Following that, we will then be bringing that to Council in terms of identifying Council's funding of the project. In October 12, Council approved $5.3 million for funding of effectively phase 2 of the project. We're currently within that at the moment, but the project reforecast, as a heads up, will probably exceed that amount. So this paper will come in probably the 26th of March in line with the business case. Apart from that, the rest of the financials are there. I'm probably more than happy to take any questions if there are any.
The need for more money, how much of that could be attributed to Plan Change 6?
Perhaps a piece of...
Dare I ask?
Maybe I should
You might
that one
want
to
to know
this.
the answer to that question. The EPA process has been much more strongly focused on Plan Change 6 rather than the RWSS than either the Council or we thought at the time, and so the split of the costs of that between Council and HBRIC was heavily weighted towards HBRIC in the original agreement between us. If you did a fair allocation of costs, probably more of it would fall on the Council. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I guess.
Negotiation pending. Councillor Barker.
All I can say to you in the interim is, as with the dam, design and construct, fixed price, fixed term. Anyway,
Not so with the EPA, unfortunately.
Well, anyway, just as an aside, I want to come back to the communications. We went past this, and I'm just conscious of Councillor Balford's point that we need to make sure that HBRIC and HBRC are kept quite separate. And I see that we've got here the listed communications activity plan for HBRIC. And down here it's got the release on public consultation opens, public consultation halfway, public consultation ends. I would have thought the public consultation was for HBRC,
Yeah, that's...
and it should be entirely responsible for it rather than HBRIC. And if HBRIC is going to be doing it, it will confuse the public. And I think Councillor Belford has made it clear, and I agree with him, that the things should be separated, and we shouldn't be having a mixing here. It seems to me we've got a mixing here. Am I reading that correctly?
Oh, it's fair to say, as it's laid out there, I think it's probably more of a thought process about what's ahead, but clearly unequivocally the public consultation process belongs with HBRC. We don't need, fair to say, speaking on behalf of HBRIC, we don't need that complexity actually.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew's right. Certainly from the time that if Council decides to push a button on a special consultative process because you have identified a preferred option and you want to go out and consult on that, then that's absolutely within the realm of Regional Council. I think, the work's been done by one person, all the work, so it's all just sort of a listing of everything that's going to be coming up. And but yes, it's fair to say that the HBRC stuff should be taken out of this report.
I would appreciate that, because it does imply, if you read this as a disinterested party, that in actual fact HBRIC has got the hand up the back of HBRC telling it what to do. I don't feel entirely comfortable with that. I wanted to be very clear.
Your point's well made, Councillor Barker. I think from the perspective of making sure that nothing falls between the cracks, having both streams of communication on one page, but being very clear about which party is responsible for which piece would be helpful, and it's a helpful improvement. Thank you.
Councillor Belford.
I was hoping to come out of today with a better sense of what the overall timing was, which many of those decisions do fall in our hands as far as the design of the public consultation process and so forth. Are we able to, on that whiteboard or at some point in today's conversation, get a better sort of mapping out of how this decision process might flow along here?
Look, I think I'd, given that you're now reasonably confident that you'll be tabling the business case on the 26th of March, is that correct? I think, Councillor, with your indulgence, we could do a paper along those lines to Corporate and Strategic on the 12th of March, rather than try and scramble to get some dates up now. If you prefer, we certainly need to bring the comms manager back in, and we need to look at a whole lot of logistical stuff. We also need to be mindful of the annual plan consultation process as well. So there's a few factors that I like a little bit more time just to really think about that and get our thoughts down for you to comment on.
But my takeaway, I guess, from this discussion today is that no one is expecting any surprise of any sort on April 15th.
Oh, so the draft consent conditions, the draft decision from the Board of Inquiry will seek comment on the consent conditions. Basically, what happens with the Board of Inquiry process, when they issue a draft decision, it's not out there for debate on whether it's a good decision or not. It's out there for comment on how well it'll work. And so, if we get a decision on mid-April that says that consent's denied, then that's it. That's it. These guys can pick up and go home. We still have Plan Change 6 to do. So in some respects, we will know in mid-April whether or not the scheme is going to get consents, and there will obviously be opportunity then to fine-tune what those conditions are.
Presumably these gentlemen will need to decide whether, given that decision on April 15th, a dam can be operated within the constraints or lack thereof of Plan Change 6, correct?
Perhaps Councillor Ben.
So that'll take a little bit of time, will it not?
Perhaps Councillor Belford might like to wait until I get to the end of the presentation and revisit this question.
There is more to come. Comms, everyone, no more questions on comms. Can we go back to the questions in regard to pages 93 through 95? Did you have any more comment? Okay. If there's a burning one, I'm sure we can sneak it back in, but I'll just ask Dr. Pearce to give us perhaps a bit more of a high-level overview of things as he sees them.
So, thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, councillors. At 10 o'clock this morning, your Chairman asked me if I would essentially redo the presentation that I made to some councillors at the end of your last meeting. I think because there was some confusion among people as to whether or not that was going to happen today in the public session or whether it was going to happen in a more wide public forum. And I had certainly prepared something for a wider public forum, but that needs to be aligned with the timing of bringing the business case and other matters to the council. So I'm going to essentially rerun through the presentation that I gave to those councillors who were present last meeting, which I think gives you an overview of not just the RWSS but also Plan Change 6. So It's probably going to take me 20 minutes to do this. I'll ask your indulgence, and I probably won't deal with questions until I get to the end, but I'm more than happy to deal with questions at the end. You've had a fair old go at questions in any case during the last 40 minutes or so, so let's just go for it. So if we start at the context of the RWSS, both